Welcome to State of Wellbeing, a podcast from South Dakota State University. The State of Wellbeing is a holistic well-being podcast with the goal of supporting the campus community as we strive to be a growing, high-performing, and healthy university.
Welcome to this episode of State of Wellbeing podcast. My name is Teresa Seefeldt, Vice Provost for Undergraduate Education, and I am joined today by Kevin Sackreiter. Kevin, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, it's fun to be here.
So part of our summer podcast series is going to focus on community building, and specifically community building in the classroom. And we want to think about it in both the traditional classroom space as well as in the online space. So we're going to have a series of 2 episodes that are really going to specifically focus on community building. And Kevin, with your role in supporting faculty, you've done a lot of work in helping understand what community means in the classroom. So can you start by just telling us a little bit about the work that you do here at SDSU?
Yeah, I'd love to do that. I feel like I've been here a while now. I think I came to SDSU back in 2010 after about 10 years at Northern State University. And so I serve as the executive director for the Center for Professional Enrichment and Teaching Excellence. Sometimes there's a lot of words in there. We need to get them out. Originally, our center was called the Teaching Learning Center. Very clear focus on teaching and learning. And now we've kind of broadened that to really support faculty, staff, on a wide range of roles, from well-being to teaching and learning to student-instructor relationships, dab our toes into accessibility, artificial intelligence, really the whole realm of teaching and learning, and to some extent the faculty life cycle, supporting faculty through that experience. We don't get a chance to work with students directly, but I do think our office has the opportunity to impact every student's experience, graduate, undergraduate, every student's experience as they come to South Dakota State University. And so I think we take a very student-centered approach in a lot of the conversations that we have. Yes, we focus on pedagogy and teaching and learning strategies and how to enhance teaching in the classroom, but everything's through that lens of the student. What do we need to do to help our faculty better support their students? And a lot of that takes on a relationship conversation, a relationship tone, really focus on being student-centered, prioritizing the needs of our students, their needs specifically related to their teaching and learning needs, their learning needs. What do they need from us as faculty, as staff, to be successful here at South Dakota State University? And so that's really our focus. It's our goal. And really every piece of programming goes through that lens as we decide, okay, is this a priority for us or not?
Yeah, so that relationship component that you mentioned, I think is really critical to this conversation about community and belonging in the classroom and how that impacts student learning and the student experience. So can you tell us a little bit about what community in the classroom means to you? And in your experience in working with faculty and course design, why does community matter for student learning? How does community impact the student learning experience?
You know, at its core, I think there's a level of want to be there that indicates to me that there's strong community. And you can sense that when students walk into the room. Are they saying hello to the instructor? Is the instructor saying hello to them as they walk in the room? Are they talking to their classmates? I think that's a big indicator of strong community. And so when you say, like, what does it mean to me? What does community mean to me when we have this conversation? I think at its core, it's do the students, do the faculty clearly demonstrate that they enjoy being in the room? And then I think it goes much deeper than that. You enjoy being in the room because you feel like you're supported. You feel like you have a connection to the content and a connection to the other learners that are in the space. I think all of those things combine to create community, but they don't just happen, right? Like, there are a lot of intentional things, and probably intentional things both on the part of the faculty member, but also on the part of the student, as far as buying into that experience and allowing themselves to want to be a part or to embrace that experience and be a part of that educational experience, that learning community piece. And so I think, very easy answers. Everybody wants to be there. Everybody wants to be around one another and wants to be a part of that learning experience. But then deeper, it's what are we doing intentionally to create opportunities for community, from before class, from day one, from week 12 of the class, like what steps are we taking to make sure that we as faculty show our students that we want them there, we're excited to have them there and be a part of this experience with us, and then what are our students doing to kind of buy into that and allow themselves to be a part of that experience as well?
Yeah, that's great. So then how do you think this really impacts the student learning perspective? That we know that they want to be there, they're excited to be there, they're having these conversations. How does it impact their ability to say learn the content of the course? Because I, as a faculty member, I'm thinking about, I've got all kinds of different things that I need to cover in this course. Does community have a connection to student learning?
Oh, I think 100%. I think that when you want to be somewhere, your motivation is higher. When you feel a connection to a faculty member, your motivation is higher. You're willing to do the things, and willing to do the things is maybe not the greatest way to phrase that, but your interest in doing the things that are being asked in the class, I think, are higher when you know that there's a connection and support between a faculty member and a student, a faculty member and the course content, the student and the course content, the student and the student. Like when all of those things work together to create that relationship. And at the end of the day, I think that's the key to the community, is the relationship. When all of those things are in place, I feel like we all perform better when we feel connected to the people that are around us and have maybe a personal investment in the thing that we're doing, whatever that thing might be. And so I think that's really one of the keys to me within that relationship piece, is the relationships build the connection. And through that connection, I think there's a level of motivation, of interest, of I want to do well because I have this relationship with this person. And I don't know if there's guilt associated with that relationship piece, but if Teresa, you're my instructor and I know that you care about my performance and my learning in the class, I'm going to want to do well. I'm not going to, at some level, I don't want to let you down, right? And I think there's that connection that develops because relationship and community get built. Like we're all in this together and we all need to row the boat, I guess. That's a University of Minnesota football thing, but row the boat to get where we need it to go, right?
Yeah, I like that. I'm reminded of the Creating Significant Learning Experiences book and the dimensions of learning that are presented there, and that caring about the course and the course content is part of that, and helping build those relationships, building that connection helps to connect the students more to the content as well as to the faculty member. So that's great. So you talked a little bit about kind of what you see in a classroom when you walk in and you know that there's good community there, but I'm curious to know if there are particular characteristics or conditions that really need to be in place for community in that classroom environment to form.
I think there needs to be a level of intentionality about prioritizing community. And I'm going to put that probably on the faculty member, right? Like, I think the faculty member needs to make building community, make building relationships one of those first priorities of the course. And you mentioned, I have a lot of content I need to get through. But I would argue building community isn't going to take you a great deal of time either. And at some level, we all have to kind of, as professionals, as teachers, have to have this internal debate, decision-making process. Like, I can teach a course and just focus on the content and not build relationships and not get to know my students. But at some level, the joy, I don't know if that's the right phrase, but I think the joy, the connection, all of those kind of terms gets lost. If it's just, honestly, if I'm just a face-to-face Google option and my students are just showing up to get the information, the educator in me would argue that's kind of an outdated perspective. Like, I don't think that's students don't need us to just get the information. They need us to facilitate their learning. And a key component of that is building relationships, getting to know the students. I think students want that as well when they come to the course. And so I think that that's kind of one of those things that as an instructor, we all have to decide, like, is it worth taking 2-3 minutes in a class period and asking the students how are they doing? What's going on in life? Asking questions like that and building relationship, or are those 3 minutes not important and we're just going to do content? And I would argue the investment of those 2 to 3 minutes is going to allow your students to learn at a higher level, because now they feel like you're getting to know them. You care about them more than as just, I'm picking on Teresa today, more than just as a pharmacy student, right? You care about them as a human being. And I think our students really embrace that and connect to their faculty members and perform highly for their faculty members who take the time to just give up 2 minutes of content a day and actually get to know who they are as human beings.
Yeah, I really like that. I think one of the other things that faculty sometimes struggle with is, all of these courses are different. We've got, small sections of 25 students. We've got large sections of close to 400 students. We've got lectures, we've got labs, we've got studios. What are some of the things that you would recommend to a faculty member as they're thinking about community in these different classroom contexts? Does community look different in a small course versus a large course, or not?
I think that's a great question, and I think that's one that we've probably struggled with as a university. I mentioned I came in 2010. I think this idea of all these different types of class sizes and types of class modalities and how is it different is something that we've had as a conversation point for a long time. And I like to kind of twist that a little bit, and I kind of go with, well, but they're different, but how are they similar? And I think that's something to really think about. I'm notorious for saying whether you have 400 students in your classroom or you have 5, good teaching is good teaching. And in my world, a huge part of good teaching is building relationships and connections with your students, right? And so whether I have 5 students, 400 students, whether I'm doing a live Zoom-based lecture, whatever the case may be, in all of those modalities, you can show up 5 minutes early to class and greet your students as they walk into the room. In all of those modalities, you can create opportunities for your students to, for example, do a think, pair, share, or do a small group discussion, or have a project where they are working together to get to an end, whatever that end might be, right? And so I think all of those things are things that you can do. In all of those things, you can carve out 30 seconds, a minute, to talk to each individual student. We could talk about the persistence project at some point, but one of those key components is having every student come to your office or join you on a Zoom call. And maybe they just turn in an information sheet about who they are, but now you can ask them a question. And just taking that little bit of time to get to know them individually is huge. If you're in a face-to-face class, those first couple class periods and creating, I'll use the term icebreakers, but creating time to have some icebreaker moments where the students get to know one another, because you're going to have them talking to each other, hopefully the rest of the class period. If you can take the time in those first couple class periods, one that we use at New Faculty Orientation is they all have phones, right? Like every one of them. They all have computers. They all have photos on those phones. Ask them to find a phone that they're find a picture on that phone that they're comfortable sharing, and share it with 3 students in the classroom and tell them why that picture is important to you. It takes a minute, 2 minutes, but now they've started to build personal connections. And that's the key to community, right? And I would tell you as the instructor, I think this is the other important part, is you're not creating icebreakers just for your students. If you ask your students to find a picture on their phone and talk about for 20 seconds why that picture is important, you should do the same thing, right? Like, don't build this wall that they know, you're the professor on the hill and they're the students and we don't cross over. Like, no, let them get to know you a little bit to the extent that you're comfortable, but get to know who you are just a little bit, and that will help them build connection with you as well. And so long answer to a great question, one we continue to struggle with, but I think at the end of the day, yes, we have lots of different ways that we teach, lots of different class sizes and class types. But if we stop thinking about them as always being so different and we look at the similarities that can be found in good teaching practice, I think there's a lot of community building ideas or options or practices that can be consistent across all the different modalities. We don't need to view them as different, but if we know that getting to class 5 minutes early, whether it's 5 or 500, and just saying hello to the students as they walk in and asking them how their day has gone, you can do that regardless of class size. And so I think there's a lot of similarities in the approaches to building community, but sometimes we get lost in like, oh, I teach 500 students or I teach online. I can't do these things. When in reality, I think you can. There's a lot of ways that you can get to know those students and build relationships.
So let's dive into a little more about those ideas and approaches. I love the icebreaker, the photo icebreaker idea. I think that could be a great way to start building community. So let's say that I'm a new faculty member. I'm thinking about the design of my course. What are some recommendations, practical approaches that you could give to a faculty member, say in that first week or two, of really how to get that course started off in the right way to build community?
Right. You know, this is really basic, and this goes for everybody. The class ahead of yours probably ended 10 minutes prior to the top of the hour. Get there 10 minutes prior to the top of the hour, so when that classroom clears out, you're in the room. You're welcoming students. You're greeting them as they walk in. You're not getting there to just look over your course materials. Like, you should know what you're going to teach that day, right? So get there early and use the 5 to 10 minutes prior to class as a relationship building opportunity. And I see so many faculty come walking in a minute before class, or they're there 5 minutes early, but they're up at the podium and they're shuffling through books, shuffling through papers. And the pessimist in me, I've observed probably 1,000, 1,500 classes in my career. The pessimist in me says a lot of times that's not preparation. That's I'm there early, but I don't want to engage with my students. And I would tell you to force yourself to get out away from the podium. You know what you're going to talk about that day. Get out from the podium, go greet the students, talk to the students. And I think where that can be hard is we've had a lot of conversations about, well, what do I talk to them about? Talk to them about the weather. This is South Dakota. Talk to them about the weather, right? Like, maybe you're not a sports fan, but be familiar with the fact that maybe there was a basketball game the night before or a football game that weekend. And just things such as, hey, Teresa, did you see the football game this weekend? Did you go to the game? Oh, you didn't go to the game? Well, what were you doing? And it's just simple conversational questions. Think of it like small talk at a party or small talk at a reception. A lot of times those questions don't have a lot of deep meaning behind them, but we're talking, we're having conversations, and I think that goes a long way. The other thing I would tell a new faculty member, and we do tell new faculty at new faculty orientation, is get to know your students' names. I don't know that there's a more powerful thing that you can do than getting to know the students' names. And now this always leads to the question, we have different class sizes. Oh, I have 400 students. I can't learn all their names. It's easier for those people who teach 5, 10 people in a class. And you're right, it is. It's a lot easier if you teach 10 students to know all their names than if you teach 400. But I always argue you don't need to know all 400 names. I don't need to look out in the room and be like, oh, that's Pete. Now, Michael Gonda on our campus can do that. It's an incredible thing. I've seen it happen. The man is a genius with names. I'm not capable of doing that, however. But you can know 10 or 20 names in a 400-person class period, and you can be intentional about using those names when you have the opportunity to use them. And just showing that you know some of the names, I think shows that you care about students, care about community relationships, that it's not just a number on a piece of paper anymore. You're actually taking time to get to know them. You know, some of the other things those first couple weeks that I would really recommend is we talked icebreakers. And we have a big book of multiple books actually, of different types of icebreakers people can use. I love to have the students get in 2 circles. One was an inside circle of 10 or 15. The other was an outside circle of 10 or 15. And the outside circle would face the inside circle. And I would ask a question. They would each take 20 seconds and answer the question. And then the outside circle would rotate a person. And we would just have, maybe we'd have 10 questions. And it's the first couple days. We'd use 10 or 15 minutes for this. But ask a question and then we'd move on. And everybody talked to about 10 people in that class period that day. And I thought that was an easy one. I didn't have to come up with a new pedagogy. I mean, you just stood in a circle and talked to somebody, right? And that was a great one to do. And there's lots of other icebreakers. Everybody has kind of the ones that they prefer, but doing those kind of things to get to know people. And then the other thing I would really encourage people to do, and it's part of that persistence project that I talked about, but I think the persistence project, grounded in the idea of what can we do, as the title says, what can we do to get students to persist in our course and get to the end successfully, right? And it also has a lot to do with getting them to persist at the university. That's a bigger conversation, but by looking at from this persistence lens at individual class periods, there's a few things that you can do within that persistence project. The first one is give your students some feedback in the first 2 weeks of class. Have something that they're getting feedback on from you so they know if they're being successful in the course. That feedback opportunity is it's a community building tool. I'm thinking they're escaping me right now. One of the other really important tenets of that is letting your students have an opportunity to connect with you. And so meeting with your students for even a couple minutes individually, one-on-one with you, maybe it's 1-on-3, depends on how this works, is one of the pieces that we ask within the first month of the course, is find a way to meet with every student in your course. Now, I grant, and I hear this kickback, if I have 400 students, how do I meet with every student in my course? And you know what? You might not be able to, but you could be creative, and maybe you turn that into, I'm going to have groups of 5 or 10 in my class, and I'm going to ask the question of the groups that I would ask if they came and met with me. And now I'm just going to be circulating and listening, but you're giving, again, it's a kind of a twist on an icebreaker. You're giving them a chance to talk. But we can talk to anybody who's interested in that more. We have stickers if you want to engage in the persistence project, and you can put them on your windows. But I think those are some of the things that really help to build community within a class, is opportunities to get to know each other as students, but opportunities to get to know you as the instructor. And you can do that in an online environment. You can do those things in face-to-face, hybrid, whatever the case may be. There's lots of ways that we can help you figure that out too. And I know that it's not always easy. The social connection piece isn't necessarily what you were hired here to do. But at the same time, I'd argue that's one of the most important things about your role as a faculty member, is helping students see that you are a support and you do care about them as an individual, not just as an animal science student or a visual arts student or whatever the case may be, right? And so let us help you as well. I think that's one of the things we're here to do, is help you figure out how to do that in a way that you're comfortable with as well. Not everybody wants to ask questions as students come in, but we can figure out ways that you can do that in a way that you're comfortable with as well.
That's great. I think my kind of big takeaway messages from what you just described is that this doesn't have to be something that is super formal. It doesn't have to be something that takes a ton of class time. It's just about talking with your students and building relationships. 100%. And that can be done in any classroom, in any environment.
Well, and I think it's building relationships, but I think showing enthusiasm for where they are at as students as well, right? Like, if you have athletes in the room, knowing what's going on with them. If you have students that are in the speech and debate team, or they're in FFA or 4-H, or, they're active in one of the student government organizations or political organizations on campus, just knowing what's going on and being enthusiastic about the things that interest them. And I think if you want to talk about how do you build relationships and trust with students, I think as a faculty member, as a staff member, if you can show genuine excitement for the things that interest your students, they're gonna work for you. I'm struggling for the right word right there, but they're going to do the things that you're asking in your class because they think and believe, and hopefully rightfully so, that you care about who they are as a person and what interests them. Again, they're not just, picking on Teresa, they're not just a pharmacy student, right? But they're this human being who really loves to take photos in their spare time. And you found that out because you asked some questions and they shared this information with you. And you showed genuine enthusiasm for the fact that they like to take pictures, right? Or they like to run track. And now you know this about them. I think a great way to build relationships is look at what the students are wearing. And if you want to have conversations, and maybe they're wearing a Harvard sweatshirt or something, not wearing SDSU stuff that day, and you'd be like, oh, where'd you get your Harvard sweatshirt? Who knows what that might open up, right? Or maybe they have, whatever the case may be, a Taylor Swift t-shirt on. I'm thinking of my daughter right now. She's wearing, if you ask my daughter about Taylor Swift, her favorite teacher she's ever had, and she's a junior in high school right now, showed a genuine interest in her passion, her obsession with Taylor Swift. And this man's retiring this year, and she went out and bought him hasn't had him as a teacher for 3 years, went out and bought him a card just to thank him for the connection that he built with her and for caring and just that interest in her Taylor Swift obsession. I think he loved Taylor Swift too. I don't really know for sure, but she remembered that, right? And that was so powerful and so impactful. And I think those are the things, you don't have to care about Taylor Swift at all, but there's a lot of students, if you just be like, hey, I heard she's dating Travis Kelce, oh, they would light up. And it's that easy, right? And just showing that, I think, can go a long way in towards just building relationships, showing you care, and it's easy. I think that's the key. I don't think relationship building and community building needs to be hard. I think it can be intimidating if you're not a person who's that comfortable with that. But we can give you some tools and help you figure out ways to do that in a really powerful but a really accessible, easy way for you as an individual working with students.
I love that. So if I've gotten the course kind of started off with building community, how do I sustain that over the course of the semester? So a lot of what we've talked about so far for strategies have been in those first couple of weeks, the icebreakers and things like that. Now, the conversations before class can continue throughout the entire
100%.
semester, but do you have other strategies that you tell faculty about to help sustain community through the semester?
I think a lot of times it does it itself. If you can really get community rolling right away, that community is just going to keep going. It's going to be easy, right? But I think there are pedagogical strategies that you can use. I think, using really simple pair and share type of strategies, having some think, pair, share opportunities where students continue to get to talk about what's going on or talk to one another about the content or what's going on in the course. Larger small group discussions, I think, can be really powerful as well. I think opportunities to give students the chance to apply content to their own lives, to their own experience, and getting them to share that. I think, again, it really is about letting them build those personal connections. And so sometimes we get really focused on, the instructor has to do this, all these things to build community and maintain, constantly getting to know the students. And I don't think that's it. I really think if you can build a course where students can feel a personal connection to the content or find a way to apply the content to their own lives, to their future career goals, I think those type of things build community because, again, there's an investment the students feel a connection and an investment within the content and feel like the content is relevant to their lives. And there's a level of just providing opportunities for that relevancy to continue to occur. And I think if you can do that, students will want to be there. And back at the beginning of this conversation, what is community? We said there's this feeling of wanting to be there. And if you can do that and you can maintain that, I think that's a great way to build community. You don't have to constantly be coming up with new questions to ask, right? At some point, you just know who they are. So what can you do to help them continue to want to be there and want to learn? And I think you do that by allowing them to see how the content applies to their lives, how it will apply to their future careers, that application piece. And, I would hope as the course goes on, we get to those higher levels of learning anyway. And so I think just continuing to give students those opportunities to make those connections is great. And that's by adding application components to the content. And you can do that all kinds of different ways. We probably don't have time to get into it in too depth here, but we can help you figure out how to develop projects, tests. And we're talking, it could be tests, but even just daily discussions that allow the students to reflect on the content, show you how they see the content in their own experiences and lives through their own lens. I think that's the best way to ultimately continue to build community and continue to get to know them, continue to be available to those social conversations. But at the same time, we mentioned this earlier, we are about teaching the content, right? Well, teach the content through a lens that they can connect to. And I think if you do that, you're going to have a lot of success with community building.
That's great. So we had the fortune of having a workshop recently at SDSU on Generation Z students and learned a little bit about the characteristics of the current generation of traditional age students that we have here at the university. And one of the characteristics that we talked about is that Generation Z students crave authenticity. They do like those in-person connections, but they want to make sure that it is authentic. And I think that can be kind of a hard thing to think about as a faculty member of, how do you have these conversations in an authentic way? So what suggestions would you have for faculty who are interested in building community with an authentic manner to it?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think this is a tough question to explain, and I say that because I think there has to be a naturalness to that, and it can't be forced. But at its core, I think you just need to want to do it, and you can't go in because Kevin and Teresa say, "Oh, we need to build community." Okay, I have to go do this. I'm going to ask you how the weather was. Students are going to see through that right away. You have to want to get to know them as a person, right? And you have to, I think the best teachers love to teach. They know their content, but they love being around students. And students can see that. If you don't love being around your students, if you don't use language that's student-centered in your syllabus, if you don't have policies that recognize the reality of the lives that students are living, they're going to know right away whether or not you're authentic, whether or not you really get them, care about their experience. And so I never tell anybody what's right or wrong in a syllabus. I think that's up to each individual instructor. But I would really look at your syllabus through a student-centered lens. Reflect on your philosophy of teaching through a student-centered lens. And, are we here to create policy and enforce policy? Or are we here to create an environment where students can learn and be successful learning? And I think if you build that student-centered perspective into everything that you do from a teaching and learning philosophy, and you think about that from from writing a syllabus to how I interact with students to how I even how I assess the pedagogical strategies I use, anything related to the course. I think that demonstrates if your authenticness, and students are going to make really quick snap judgments, right? Like if they look at your syllabus or they go through that first week of class and they don't feel like this is real, we use the term ghosting a lot at those workshops, right? Like they're going to shut off. I always go back to, I think about my daughter. She's a junior. She's going to be a college student in a year or so. Like she reads you quick. And if she doesn't feel like people are being authentic with her, her willingness to work for them goes down pretty quick, right? Very fast. And I think that's kind of that generation. Like what you say and what you do better line up. And they're watching and they're looking at that. And we think they're buried in their phones all the time, but they're not. They're paying attention. They're watching. They're learning or observing what's going on. And so I guess that would be my takeaway to my answer. Short answer to your question would be, you need to want to be that authentic relationship building person. You can't do it because a department head says, oh, you all need to build relationships better. And begrudgingly you go in and you're like, okay, let's do an icebreaker. They know right away if you care about this icebreaker or not. And so I would just say you have to, as a faculty member in 2026, you have to embrace that building relationships, being student-centered is maybe priority one in your job role. And being the content deliverer, the guard of the information, the gatekeeper of that's not priority one or maybe even two or three anymore, right? Like building relationships, creating pedagogy that allows students to apply content. At some level, just being a support system are all really important things that students are looking for. And I mentioned it earlier, I'll mention it again. They don't necessarily need us to learn information or to get information anymore. They can get that through AI. Before that, they could get it off Google. They could get it through Khan Academy. They could get it in a book. Like it was that traditional perspective, I don't think is as relevant anymore. But building relationships, getting to know students, making it a place that they want to engage and learn, I think is really important. And I'll push back on people who would say to me, well, that's just fluff. That's not stuff that we need to be focusing on. And I don't say right and wrong very often, but I think that's wrong. I think that's not a relevant perspective anymore. And we still need to have standards and policy and rigor, as much as sometimes that word makes me cringe. We need all of those things in our classes, but we can have all of those things, but while still making students a priority and the student experience and relationship building a priority. How you were taught 20 years ago might not be the way anymore. And so we have to be adaptable within our pedagogy, adaptable within our relationships.
Yeah, and I think this is really where the connection to well-being comes into
100%.
play as well, that student-centered approach, the connections, the relationships, creating that environment where students can learn and thrive. That connects to all of the dimensions of well-being that we talk about on this podcast, and students really need to have those in order to be successful in the class and learn that content that we're talking about is so important to guide the students.
Well, and I would just add, I think if they don't, I think what you said is really, really good. They need these things in place in order to be able to learn. And I think I just want to emphasize that. If students don't feel supported, don't feel like you care about about them as human beings, they don't feel like you care whether they learn this or not, they're not going to learn. We mentioned the ghosting term. I don't think it would be strange to say a student might just quit. They might just stop engaging in your class, stop performing. I think about my seventh grader, and I think that's classic him. If he doesn't feel like you're being supported, he can't leave seventh grade, obviously, but you see his performance and his willingness to work for a teacher drop significantly when he doesn't feel like the support is there. Like he feels like he can't do it at some level. And I think that's our students. They need these things in place in order to learn. And if these things aren't in place, some students will push through. But there's a lot of students who are just going to be like, no, I'm not going to do it. Or I'm going to go find some other teacher who will support me the way I need to be supported, and I'm going to take the class from them. And that might not be here. And so it's a well-being issue, it's a retention issue, it's a student success issue. And I think we have to be thinking about all of those things. And you might have been hired because you're a content expert, but there's a lot more that needs to come with your role as a teacher than just being the content expert.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up our conversation, are there any final thoughts that you have about building community or the importance of community in the classroom that you'd like to share?
Just that I think building community should really be a priority for every faculty member, but I think it should be a priority for every employee of South Dakota State University as well. Like all of us can do simple things like talk to the people that we see, and it might not even be students, but talk to other employees and ask them how their day is going, or just have those kind of conversations, smile, like all of those things, use names. I would just say all of those things are really important. And especially if you're a faculty member, we're happy to have these conversations with others as well. Come over to the CPED office, give me a call, send me an email, pop in. Let's talk about ways that you can build community in your classroom. And I promise you, we can figure out ways, especially in the classroom, but we can find ways to help you do it that won't take a ton of your class time, won't make you horribly uncomfortable if this isn't something that comes easy for you, but can be done without using a ton of class time, without making anybody uncomfortable, but can really be important for student success, but I think at some level are going to help you really enjoy teaching as well, and that classroom experience and getting to know the students as well. And so it'll hopefully help the students be more successful, but I think it's going to help you as a faculty or a staff member find more success or happiness in your role as well, because we're building community, we're getting to know people, we're all investing in the same thing.
I think that's spot on. One of my favorite parts of being a teacher is just being able to interact with my students and learn from them and learn about them and people-centered. It's one of our core values as an institution, right? So it's all about that community and relationship building across the university.
I look back when I was teaching speech communication courses, and I was also a speech and debate coach at the time, and I had a couch in my office. And I look back now, and there were times when I would get really frustrated because that couch was always full. From 9 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, sometimes 6, 7, because we'd be doing practices. There was always a student on that couch. And I could never get grading done. I could never get things done. And so I'd have to take a lot of stuff home or whatever. The thing I miss most about being an active instructor, teaching a full course load, all of that, is that couch. Because as frustrating as it would be when I couldn't get stuff done, those relationships that I was able to build, I still have those relationships with students 15 years later now. And that's the thing that I probably miss most about not being an active full-time faculty member, is I don't get the opportunity to build relationships and have that kind of continuous conversation with students. And that's the thing I miss. I don't always, I don't miss the grading and some of the, but I miss the relationship component. And that's what I enjoyed most about being a teacher. And so if you can I'm not saying everybody needs a couch in their office, but if you can give yourself that opportunity to build those relationships, you're going to add so much joy to your experience as a teacher, and it's going to reshape how you view teaching and learning. I'm convinced it will. And so let us help you do that. I think we can provide those resources and help faculty members be very successful at doing that and find maybe some new connections to teaching and to their role at the university.
Well, thank you, Kevin, for providing your insights on building community in the classroom. And I love your comments about, really being student-centered and thinking about them, their learning, their well-being as you're building your courses and teaching over the course of the semester. That's really where that connection between community and well-being comes from. And thank you all for listening to this episode of State of Wellbeing.
Thank you for listening to this episode of State of Wellbeing, a podcast from South Dakota State University. This podcast is brought to you by the Mental Wellbeing Team and SD State Health.